Would you like me to go ahead?
We are live on Zoom. We can start.
There's an announcement from the interpreter first.
Yeah, just that'll be Julie. You can.
Very good.
Good evening. I am one of the two interpreters at your service this evening. This meeting will be interpreted simultaneously into Spanish. If any comments are made in Spanish, you can click on the three dots at the bottom of the screen to choose the interpretation function and the English language so you can hear that comment interpreted. Muy buenas noches, bienvenidos. Esta reunión será interpretada simultáneamente al español. Si quiere escuchar en español, por favor haga clic en el icono del globo al pie de la pantalla o en los tres puntitos donde dice More o Más. Ahí puede seleccionar interpretación y escoger el idioma español. Si quiere hacer un comentario en español, este será traducido al inglés. Gracias y bienvenidos. Back to you.
Thank you. Good evening. I see our leader is here, so we can call the meeting to order.
Sorry. Well, get from Generous.
Oh, meeting to order, sir.
Does someone want to volunteer to do the pledge?
Sure.
Oh.
You stand. Hands over the heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Did we do the Spanish interpreter?
Yes, all done.
Okay.
You're up at the tree.
All right. So we're going to move to approval of the agenda. Everyone looked at the agenda, I'm assuming.
Roll call. I didn't.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Okay. Marquez de la Plaza.
Here.
Mike Nichols.
Present.
Joe Roca.
Here.
Spencer Scott.
Here.
Betsy Van Dyke. Cynthia Strucker. Here. Vicky Clues. Here. Lonnie Lazar. Here. And I help him.
Here.
That's it.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to move on to the agenda. Can I get everyone read it? Can I get a motion to approve? Mike was first. Second, you want a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now it's time. If anyone on the council has a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda, now is the time to let that be known. Anybody? No? Okay. So we're going to move on to consent agenda, which we have the August 8th, 2024 minutes. Does someone have any comments on that or want to make a motion to approve the minutes as is?
I'm going to approve as is.
Second.
All in favor?
I'd like to abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Same here.
Okay, we're going to move to council comment on matters not listed on the agenda. And just so everyone knows how this kind of works, if you've not been here before, we'll usually go to the council first. They'll make some comments, then it'll go back to you to make comments or questions when the speakers happen. And we do have time limits, and we ask everyone to keep everything to 2 minutes or less when they're making a comment or have a question or anything. Mike.
Thank you. I have a comment regarding the Sonoma County Planning Commission meeting coming up on September 19th at 1:30 p.m. And I want to congratulate Lucy Hardcastle with her hard work and that of her associates on the Forestville Planning Association for working since 2007 to get this park zoning change completed in Forestville. So the meeting is an open meeting on the 19th for staff report, and the staff is recommending to the planners that the planning commission adopt the attached resolution recommending that the board of supervisors adopt a mitigated negative declaration and approve the requested zone change, general plan amendment and use permit for the,
Mike, can you speak up? The interpreters are having trouble hearing.
louder?
Yeah.
From the beginning?
Beginning, that's fine. No, to continue.
Okay, great. So basically the staff recommendation was that the planning commission adopt the attached resolution recommending that the board of supervisors adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve the requested zone change, general plan amendment and use permit. Again, thanks to Lucy and her associates for their hard work over the last 15, almost 20 years to get this thing over the line. That concludes my comments.
Can I add on to that?
Yes.
So we had the first annual Pie in the Park on August 31st, which was also Lucy's 80th birthday. And it was a fundraiser to help maintain the park. And it was wildly successful. We had a lot more people than we kind of anticipated coming. Thanks to the D5 folks who showed up. Linda showed up, Debbie showed up, Tracy was there, I think. I ran by at one point and saw her. And anyway, we raised a good deal of money, and it's a nice way to sort of a juxtaposition with this coming up too. So it's a lovely, lovely event, and we'll have it again next year.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, this coming Sunday at the Monte Rio Community Center, there's going to be another training for the GMRS radios. And the last I heard was we had 82 people signed up, and there's room for 100. So if you're quick, you might be able to get a spot. This happened a long time ago. Tony Godwin asked me if I would sort of coordinate things and do this. And I said, you know, Tony, I'm not the best person for this. I think I know somebody who really is. So I called Dave Gatlin, who, to my tremendous joy, said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. And so he, with help from Mike, of course, and help from Patty Thayer, my alternate, and I'm sure a bunch of other people as well, put this together, and I think it's going to be really good.
Great. What time is it? I'd like a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for that comment. We've got basically sellout crowds almost at every event. We had over 100 people at Petaluma last week on radio training, two-way radio training. We have this event at Monte Rio coming up on Sunday at 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock. After you receive a free radio after the training. And the radios, thank goodness, Supervisor Hopkins was generous enough to grant the funding for D5 for the distribution of radios. Statewide or countywide, we've distributed over 600 radios in the last several months. We had a meeting in, I think I mentioned last week, and then we've got coming up in the town of Windsor on the 13th of October, and a senior living community called the Orchards in Santa Rosa in November. So this two-way radio project is really, really taken off. We have 22 mountaintop repeaters now, and we have printed guides for people on the training process, channel selection, and so forth. So it's been wildly successful.
Is there a calendar that's online somewhere?
Yes, thank you for asking. Good question. Go to WeConduit. That's www.wiconduit.org/radio.
And if anyone hasn't gone to one of these training sessions, we had one in Rainito about
2 weeks ago.
A couple of weeks ago. We had a lot of people show up, and a lot of people really got a lot out of it.
And you can go to anyone. It's not tied to the geography.
Yes, you can attend anyone. You're not tied to geography. And what happened in Petaluma last week, we had people from Napa County and Lake County who said that they wanted us to expand into those areas as well. So we'll be reaching out to supervisors in both of those counties to tap them for funding for radios in those jurisdictions.
Great. Okay. Betsy.
Joe has his.
Oh, okay, Joe.
I didn't call you.
I didn't see who's handling them.
Who's going?
I'll go.
Okay.
Night market, Gurnville Night Market is tomorrow night. And it's a really fun event in the plaza and the bridge. And y'all ought to come out, support it, and see who's there. It's really fun. Mac will be there representing.
Next week, Pride events all week. Tuesday is Give Back Tuesday at the Rainbow. Timberline Restaurant is doing. It's going to be a little more expensive than the $5 meal. They're doing a full Thanksgiving dinner for 10. And we have lots of prizes and stuff. And there's events all week. Darts on Thursday. Hula hooping in the plaza on Wednesday, prom on Friday, and the parade and festival will be on Saturday morning. Parade starts at noon. We are still accepting vendors, I believe, and parade applicants. Please come join us. It'll be fun.
We'll be there.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, if anyone out here or on Zoom has any comments or that are not on the agenda, now is the time.
It's closer to the out.
That's good.
So I'm just gonna piggyback off the Pie in the Park. Hannah at the Planning Commission is asking that people from the community reach out and support the park and before the 19th. And so if you can reach out, there's information online about that. And also I'm excited about the radio.
I think you have your hand up. If you can come up, that would be great.
And a little script.
Oh.
So I'm Sharon Martinelli, and I come from a farming family of 6 generations living in Forestville. The West County communities are being unjustly asked to bear a disproportionate burden to house an industrial project that is harmful to our health and safety, specifically the proposal of a petrochemical asphalt plant in Forestville, adjacent to the Green Valley Creek and a designated scenic highway in a high fire risk zone. The chemicals used in the production of asphalt have been recognized by the EPA as cancer causing. We fought an asphalt plant proposal 20 years ago, and we won a lawsuit against Canyon Rock Quarry. Our quality of life in Forestville is already compromised over the years with a 10-fold expansion of the quarry. The forest is destroyed, mountains demolished, and over 700 gravel trucks rolling through town 6 days a week, polluting dust as they pass by small businesses, pedestrians, and elementary school and homes. We're hearing explosions at night and on the weekend with the mining operations, and now there's a new business plan on the table to add an industrial asphalt plant in an area zoned residential and agricultural. It's also an environmentally sensitive area. Please locate this asphalt plant somewhere else in an industrial area. We have already sacrificed enough, and no amount of money can offset the health and safety issues. It's encouraging to know that Sonoma is working to protect the public from health and safety hazards and to protect our environmental resources, which cannot be replaced once they are destroyed. And thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here? On Debbie, anyone on?
Someone here.
Everyone else? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Hi, I guess this is the mic here, right? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm Heather Rawson. I'm a long-term resident here in Sonoma County. My background is I have a science degree and a teaching degree from Sonoma State and several years of law school. And I'm the current vice president of Forest Unlimited. I also lived in Forestville for many, many years, and the family has been involved in the community for many, many years. And I'm speaking today because, one, I'm very happy you're taking on these issues with health and safety, with addressing these concerns. And my particular concern I'm seeing on the table right now in Forestville has to do with the proposed plant that is particularly dangerous with fire. And fire has been an issue where we've had to evacuate multiple times in our area, and it's been very traumatic every time we've had to evacuate. And one of the concerns is many of these plants in other parts of the country, when they've put them in operation, they've had fires and explosions where they've had to evacuate up to 10 miles around. That would be Guerneville, that would be Sebastopol, that would be a huge area that we would have to evacuate due to fire. And the other concern that is, I think, really notable is the type of plant wouldn't be able to be put out with water. So our fire department would not be able to put it out with water. It would be a chemical fire. And so then it would require hazmat response. And the closest hazmat would be an issue as well. So I'm here basically wanting to thank you first for looking at the health and safety issues and the environmental concerns that you're bringing up, but also this upcoming proposal with the plant to oppose. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in our online audience that would like to make a public comment for something that is not on the agenda? I see no hands. So public comment is.
Supervisor Hopkins, you're up.
All right, I have a bunch of updates today, so I will try to keep it quick. First one to start off with kind of some upcoming calendar items to mention. On October 8th, coming to the Board of Supervisors will be our on-site wastewater treatment system, aka septics mapping study and analysis, which is a big deal. We've been working on with the CAG for a number of years. And also on that same day, we will have our micro enterprise home kitchen ordinance coming to the Board of Supervisors. And this is also something that I've been working on since pre-pandemic, which would actually allow folks in their own homes to produce sort of, cottage foods for sale. So it actually goes further than the last cottage food state bill, which was really specifically kind of about processing and value-added agricultural products to actually allow, like meals that you could cook. And so this has been kind of a big equity initiative that started with Barbie Robinson when she was the Department of Health Services Director, and Sheba Pearson-Whitley as the Economic Development Board Director many years ago, to try to provide small business opportunities for folks who are maybe struggling to make ends meet. And especially helpful, for instance, for maybe a stay-at-home mom who's raising kids but wants to try to find some side income. Also stay-at-home dads, totally not gender specific in any way. Upcoming also on October, oh yeah, it is the 8th. So that has two pretty big items that are quite relevant to West County. And then on the 15th is actually going to be a general plan status update. You'll be hearing more about one of the elements from our general plan from Claudette and Katrina later, so I won't go too much into that detail, but maybe they can also just provide like a bit of an overview of what we'll be discussing on the 15th at the Board of Supervisors. Do you want to give an update on Georgia's Hideaway? I was thinking that this happened last week, but it only happened 2 days ago. It's just been a very busy 2 days. But the Board of Supervisors did vote, and we actually now have a new developer on task for Georgia's Hideaway, which is actually Burbank Housing. Previously, West County Community Services was going to both develop and then also operate the services center at Georgia's Hideaway, but they kind of felt like the development piece was a little bit too much. So Burbank is taking over the development. West County Community Services will still be our operator and our provider. And a huge shout out to CDC team and also Tracy from my office, and just in a lot of negotiations try to make that happen. We're hoping that they'll be able to make up for some lost time, because our goal is still to have folks moved in by June of next year. That's the deadline that we have from the state. I also wanted to mention I did meet with the city of Sebastopol today regarding the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District, or EIFD, that I have mentioned at prior meetings. And we've got a big meeting coming up on the 25th at 6:30 at El Molino. And so we'll be able to have the consultants there present the information that they've garnered. Again, this is no new taxes, it's tax increment financing that could allow us to harvest some of the tax growth over time, just like redevelopment did, and invest it in things, you know, like potentially a new sheriff's substation and fire station, community center, also infrastructure. And the Board of Supervisors did adopt a policy that prioritizes climate adaptation. So I also think about how do we make our summer bridges, one of which just was severely damaged, you know, by a dam release. How do we make those permanent and, you know, have some infrastructure that's more resilient for the future? So I'm really looking forward to that meeting. We will also distribute, I didn't get it today, but there is a QR code. I know we distributed maybe last year for a different SCTA RCPA, which is Sonoma County Transportation Authority, Regional Climate Protection Authority, about the active transportation plan. Well, now we're doing our comprehensive transportation plan update. And so there's a new survey that you can fill out about what your priorities are around transportation in West County. We'll make sure to email that to the map and also get it maybe in our next newsletter from SCTA RCPA. Then I have some exciting news that was embargoed until noon today, but we are past that deadline. Save the Redwoods League is now able to publicly announce a 1,600 acre acquisition. This is something I've been working with them and the property owners on for a number of years, and they have just been phenomenal and just jumped in and took the lead and hit their home run on this one. 1,600 acres expansion of Fort Ross State Park, huge chunk of the coast. Very, very exciting. And so we were looking forward to partnering with them on that going forward. And I don't know if we had actually done this before the last MAC meeting. I was trying to remember the timing, but Save the Redwoods League is also the one who stepped in and saved Russian River Redwoods, aka Silver Estate, which the Board of Supervisors did formally acquire on behalf of the Russian River Sanitation District, which will then transfer within 10 years to regional parks to become a regional park for everyone to have an opportunity to utilize. And that is the home of the Clar Tree, which is just astounding. It's like, if you, I mean, you have to see it in person. We will definitely be making public tours available. The thing is massive and you just feel so tiny when you're standing next to it. So definitely worth a visit. On that note, I also had a meeting earlier today with Ag and Open Space and Regional Parks regarding, excuse me, a recent decision by the federal government to make this plan to eliminate barred owls to try to save the spotted owls. And so I just want to let you know that, you know, this is something that county staff is working through. We only had a brief meeting today on the decision. There's a lot of information that we don't have, but what I can say as of now is that no one has yet approached either regional parks or Ag and Open Space to request permission to go and kill owls on publicly owned property in Sonoma County. And happy to go into the weeds of this one, but I'll just leave it at that, and that we are going to form some kind of a technical working group, you know, to discuss this and potentially sort of develop a local policy or response to this direction from the federal government.
Can I say something about
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've had a couple of residents reach out to me about this, and what I found is, although there was outreach for input around this decision, it wasn't really widespread, and the problem with that is that people have very little information about why this is happening and why. So the natural reaction is, oh, they're going to go out and kill owls, give me a break. But there's a lot of science around this that really needs to be understood, and people need to be educated and come to their own conclusions anyway. And there are factors that need to be addressed. Who's doing the shooting? Where are they shooting? When are they shooting? How do they know the difference? All of that. So anyway, I'm just requesting that as much information as can be shared, the better.
And that was actually my request of both Ag and Open Space and Regional Parks, is that we need to sort of meet with our CBOs, because we're, you know, our community partners like Land Paths, who owns property, and, you know, Jenner Headlands, Wildland Conservancy, like all of these nonprofit organizations that own really large parcels in Sonoma County, so that we can try to all get on the same page, and then have a public meeting to sort of share where we are. And actually, interestingly, this kind of depredation has already been taking place on state parks property. So we're also going to be reaching out to state parks to kind of find out what the situation is there. And it is a very complicated issue. And essentially, for those who aren't familiar, you know, the spotted owl is an endangered species, and it's really that iconic species that saved a lot of our old growth forests, because people would go in and say, you can't cut down these trees because of the Endangered Species Act. And so it was really kind of important in the fight against clear cutting logging. And then the barred owl is not like introduced by humans. It's not like someone dropped a barred owl, you know, like they dropped rats on the farallons and then they just reproduced. They've been kind of encroaching across the United States. And then they essentially outcompete the spotted owl because they're just kind of better predators and just more generalists. I think the spotted owl like only eats wood rats and it uses a much huger area, you know, compared to the barred owl. And so the question that's kind of being raised is, are we just protecting one species and sacrificing another, or are we looking at the ecosystem as a whole? What happens if we kill all of the barred owls and we still don't save the spotted owl, and then we have no owls and we have lots of, you know, rodents? And so there's a lot of different questions out there that we don't have the answers to, but it's kind of been a surprising process, I think, from everyone who's been involved, because yeah, not a ton of input and kind of a somewhat shocking result, I think. So with that, more information on the barred owl. And then finally, I have a little update. I had an opportunity to meet with our sheriff and also actually separately with the Deputy Sheriff's Association head. And I just wanted to share that they actually have, believe it or not, the narcotics unit that we approved in June budget hearings is already up and running because folks were so excited about it that he actually pulled 3 staff from, you know, other sort of parts of, you know, the sheriff's office, and they have hit the ground running. I think that it's only been in operation technically like 5 weeks, and of that, a couple of the weeks were for training. And so it's really only been a few weeks, but apparently they've already seized more than a dozen guns from mostly like convicted felons and drug dealers. And then they've also seized quite a bit of drugs. They're really going after opiates and particularly fentanyl, but they have also seized meth and cocaine. And so they have not arrested a single person who was trying to purchase drugs or someone who is addicted. They're just going after the suppliers at this point, but it seems like, and they're not even fully staffed. They only have 3 people working on this right now, but they are apparently, as the sheriff said, going gangbusters. And I said, yeah, literally, because yeah, anyway. So it's quite impressive and really fast for government, I think, to have a decision in June, and they're already up and running. So don't have much more different information on that, but happy to refer any questions on that to the sheriff's office, and happy to answer any questions about anything else.
Do you want the CAL FIRE grant that we just got for the shaded fuel breaks?
The $2 million grant.
You want to mention that?
Oh, yeah. We've been working, when did we stand up on Mount Jackson? And
oh my God.
Trying to figure out.
Years ago,
yeah.
Years ago, right?
Yeah. We've been, a lot of different communities here in West County have been working on getting a process going to create shaded fuel breaks around West County and the Lower Russian River in particular. And it was actually a really great process because we all kind of said, let's connect them together as well, so it makes more sense. And CAL FIRE's been involved. Ag and Open Space has been incredible on this project. We did get some funding from the county, but then we just received a grant from CAL FIRE that will actually complete the Rio Neato shaded fuel break. So Rio Neato will have a complete circle around it. It will complete the Gernwood Park shaded fuel break. It will allow for the VTP process to start at Mount Jackson. And there is another one I'm forgetting. Rio Neato. Hold on one sec. Mount Jackson, Gernwood, Mount Jackson, Rio Neato. I guess that's it. But it supplemented what we were thinking we were going to have to go back to the county of Sonoma to ask for another couple $1 million to make this happen. But CAL FIRE came through, and I wanted to do a big shout out to Ag and Open Space for making that. Good job.
Yeah. And if you're talking about the meeting that I'm thinking of, I think it was at John Kornfeld's house. Were you in that?
Oh,
that
yeah.
And it was like right after one of the fires. And then we found out that there was a grant deadline like 4 days later. And we pulled together a bunch of people, including CAL FIRE. Marshall was there. And that was kind of the start of this whole process of, hey, we have all of these densely populated communities that used to have shaded fuel breaks, no longer do. Like, how can we pull together some applications? And so it's been incremental, but that, congratulations, have you been a phenomenal leader on that.
It's going to be great because this will get done in the next year.
I think
I said they'll be at my place in October.
What's that?
They couldn't really
Yeah.
goes through my property. They said they'd be there in October.
So super exciting and long time coming. We've been putting in hard work every year on that one.
Do you know something?
Yes, I have a comment. Supervisor on Save the Redwoods at Fort Ross edition. Is that in addition to what was published in the Press Democrat about 1,200 acres north of Jenner on second growth redwood? Are we talking about two different parcels now?
I don't know. There were a few different articles in the Press Democrat, and one was sort of like there have been speculative articles, but this is kind of the first time that we actually have a publicly approved deal between the landowner. This was 1,600. So.
I'm assuming it's probably the same parcel that they were talking
with me, yeah, and maybe potentially there are a few different parcels in play, because we have a major landowning company that's trying to divest of their assets. Correct. So we have all of these generational opportunities that really don't come around that often, and so we're trying to move on as many as possible.
It's second growth redwood. That's great.
Yes, correct. Mature second growth is how they describe it.
220 feet tall. Like
not little.
Like my front yard.
Betsy.
I have a couple of comments. We thank you from Vacation Beach and Mays Canyon for your assistance in the Save the Redwoods thing for Russian River Redwoods, right?
Yeah, that's what we're calling
because that landslide would have been on my house. And the flower tree I went to visit when I first moved here, fully pregnant and dragging a 2-year-old, and it's really quite amazing. Secondly, there's a really good article for anyone who's interested about the whole Bard Owl thing, and that was in the Press Democrat, I think 2 Sundays ago. It was very good.
Yeah.
And then the EIFD, the Sebastopol thing, when is that meeting and what time?
So it's the 25th, September 25th at 6:30 at Almadina.
Don't we have a special meeting then?
That's it.
That's it.
You are the special now.
It is.
So I would advise the public, because I've read a lot about this, to show up, because it looks like Sebastopol's kind of taking the lead on this. And it feels like we on the Lower Russian River really need to have a voice as this thing develops over time. Because we don't want Sebastopolians to run the whole show.
They feel the same way. They're worried about the county.
I would encourage us all to really be involved in that.
I think Mary Callahan, did she write the article about the spotted owls? And there's actually another article which I can share without a paywall, that there was a really interesting op-ed in the New York Times written by some professors from Oregon. So we can send that out to the MAC, and I have it as like a gift share so you can get through the paywall.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Two questions on the EIFBs. And maybe these are questions for next week, but how is that different than redevelopment?
It's not very different at all. It is essentially redevelopment 2.0. It is the system that the state created when redevelopment went away, and we said we just lost one of the biggest tools for financing really needed infrastructure projects, just because a few people in Southern California used it to build golf courses or whatever, and Jerry Brown shut it down. So it's really not very different. This time, though, we would not anticipate looping in like parks districts, and the impacts of redevelopment on the parks district, especially in the Russian River, has been really hard, and a huge portion of their budget is still sort of scooped every year, kind of leaving them with pennies on the dollar to try to maintain our infrastructure. So we would envision just partnerships between either just county and unincorporated, obviously, because there's no one else, or county-city involving the city of Sebastopol. And currently the one that's most far along in Sonoma County is actually a downtown Santa Rosa County partnership, looking at trying to, attract investment into that area.
And then second question, maybe a silly question, but what, you kind of touched on this, but what is the geographic area of that district? Is it all the Russian River? Is it all the county plus Sebastopol?
That is exactly the question we are trying to answer. And so there's a few different things. We have identified a few economic opportunity sites where we know that development will be moving forward, right? Like the large hotel that's moving forward. We have a hardware store being built that was just approved, by the Board of Supervisors south of Sebastopol. Various ones that we kind of know because of use permits are pending development. And that actually, when you just look at these economic opportunity sites and unincorporated West County, it actually adds up to $45 million worth of new development, which is, you know, not something small. Or we have also looked at actually an entirety of West County model, right? Where we look at sort of financing broadly climate resilience, and we acknowledge the fact that all of our sort of people who live in unincorporated West County have some downtown that they go to, and that is their town, even if they live several miles outside of it. And so trying to sort of capture, you know, more broadly property growth. And then Sebastopol's looking at just a city model, just a sort of corridors of 116 and 12 model. And then what if they sort of became part of a larger model that also incorporated some of West County? Again, acknowledging that there are some folks, like myself included, who live outside of town, but are still, you know, utilizing that for services. So, but great question. And I feel like since you are someone who's familiar with, you know, this kind of stuff, that it would be great to get your input on the different boundaries, and look forward to hearing your comments at the meeting.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any?
I have a question. So you mentioned the development of that hotel, like near Barlow, and the other.
I was actually talking about the one in the lower Russian River. Yeah, the Lock one, which has some other name, but I don't remember.
Got it. I was
Girdwood Park.
There we go. Thanks.
My question was, I don't know if these are privately financed things that have passed permitting that influences the money that's available for nearby towns. And I was just curious how those things are related.
That's a great question. So the mechanism is that you actually take some of property tax growth over time. And so, you know, normally property tax, you know, because of Prop 13 is limited to 1%, right? But when it changes hands, obviously something sells for a higher value, or if you have an undeveloped lot that is suddenly developed into a multi-million-dollar hotel, you know, and they're paying quite a bit of property taxes, that's a huge chunk of property tax growth that you can then capture and make into this district and sort of be part of ongoing revenue that you can then bond against. So then you can kind of, you know, take out loans essentially and be able to finance like a new bridge or a new community building, or, you know, traditionally also things like sidewalks and, you know, water and sewer infrastructure, all of those kinds of things as well. So you're basically looking at, hey, there's more money going to government. We're going to take some of that and return it to invest in the community, also to continue to attract more businesses and more development.
Does River Electric qualify? Has that been incorporated? Or a new hotel that's going in Burnville?
Which one is this one?
The camping, the glamping.
Oh, the glamping one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know where that is in the permitting process. That's a really good question.
They're almost finished with construction.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah,
well, so then it would be a little too late for that one.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it needs to be early.
Yeah, you want to capture it sort of before the property tax value goes up.
Right. Got it.
But when this,
they're opening next year in the spring.
Okay.
So construction's done in the fall.
Yeah.
As far as
That happened fast. I feel like I heard about that, but now it's there.
Well, it was dirt for the longest time. It's like last week, its structure started going up.
Wow. I hope that's what happens with George's Hideaway.
Exactly. It better.
That's some wishful thinking there.
This government.
Yeah. Okay, anyone in the audience have any questions for Supervisor Hopkins? On Zoom?
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
Oh, look who it is.
Gotta walk closer.
Come on up.
Right.
Hi, I'm Tim Lipinski. I live in Greenwood Park. In the years past, we've had issues in properties up the hill around Greenwood where we've had people squatting on the property. And we've been having to deal with a trespass action request that needs to be renewed every year by the property owner in order for the sheriff to do anything about people squatting there. Could you comment about that? Explain to folks, and maybe for the record, what a trespass action request is so more people know about it?
Okay. I wish I had more detail, but that's pretty much what I know about it, is that we have always, you know, educated folks that they need to have this on file with the sheriff's office in order for deputies to respond to remove folks who are trespassing and cite them if they're trespassing on the property. But, you know, if there's, that's definitely something where we could bring in a representative from the sheriff's office to kind of explain the process. You know, and maybe how do we make it more accessible? How do we educate folks in our newsletters? So I will definitely take that as a to-do list to follow up on. But that's pretty much, we usually just refer to the sheriff's office and then they assist folks.
Question. It's Scott's Dam, isn't it, about with the Pillsbury Lake that they're gonna take down?
Because I'm a little worried, I live in Cass, and they said that they will separate some of the water into the Russian River. And which will raise our river, and the higher the river is, Austin Creek can't get out in the flood. Are they thinking about that at all? I mean, more water in the Russian River is more flooding for us.
So,
along with that.
so I think that you're referring to the greater sort of challenge known as the Potter Valley Project, which is the way in which we have kind of water. So we have a few different things going on, and the way that Lake Pillsbury ties into that is that there are multiple sources that feed into the Russian River. Down here, the biggest impact that we have is really the confluence with Dry Creek, and most of our sort of water input is really coming from Lake Sonoma. And so that I believe feeds into Lake Mendocino, which also is having some issues with sedimentation. But long story short, we have run a ton of different models on this, and it's still very much in flux in terms of the outcome of what's going to happen. Will the dam come down? Will it not? It's looking like that dam will come down, and that Lake Pillsbury will be returned to a natural state. I doubt that the impact on the lower Russian River would be that substantial, given that that's upstream of existing reservoirs still. But that's something that I think that at some point we will definitely have a big town hall about. And the other thing that's happening right now is that we have the sort of EIR for kind of altered flows in the Russian River, also still moving forward. And so as that progresses, we will have updates and town halls with that.
Thank you.
Clarification, please. I thought at the presentation we had here a few months back, if the dam went down and Pillsbury goes away, that they were looking at like 4 out of 5 years we'd have flow, and then we'd have years that we would have no flow with the river. So to say that it doesn't affect us can't be true, because we would still have flow from Sonoma, but all the flow that's coming through and storing right now in Pillsbury and Mendocino would cease to come down. We would have dry years because of no diversion.
So that is an accurate statement. I apologize for misspeaking. I was really referring to the risk of increased flooding. Sort of the biggest, because you were talking about increased flows, right? We are very concerned actually about lack of water capacity, but the bigger impact on lack of water capacity is actually the potential shutdown of, so the hydroelectric sort of generation that, PG&E has abandoned that. And is everyone familiar with the Potter Valley Project?
Yeah.
So it pulls water from the Eel River into the Russian River, right? And it was generating electricity, but it didn't generate very much electricity, and the infrastructure is super old. PG&E is like, we're out. However, that amount of water is really critical to maintain our in-stream flows, and to make sure that we have adequate lake levels in Lake Sonoma and Mendocino. So the impact is definitely to the detriment of the water supply as this conversation moves forward overall. And that's why we're looking at potential models where there still could be publicly maintained water diversion, and then to be able to sell that water to agriculture. But you're not really worrying so much about the power generation, and that we would likely do a run of the river solution, which means that we're not pulling water from the eel when it's summertime and they need the water. We're pulling it when there's excess water in the winter. So that's kind of the run of the river solution that's been proposed. So, but thank you, I appreciate the clarification on that.
Anyone else online?
Chris, I'm going to bring you into the Zoom room. You can unmute yourself and
Hi,
start with
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I missed the first half of the meeting, but I welcome the chance to ask a question, and thanks for your work, Supervisor Hopkins and the Lower Mac Council. A lot of great things are happening in West County right now. I had a question about Vicky, our representative, brought up a potential bike path from Maribel to Jenner. And so I was wondering if you have any info on that, if that's pie in the sky or if that's actually feasible. I have a family, I have a toddler, and right now we have to drive to Forestville to go onto the trail because there's no safe path from the Forest Hill neighborhood to get into town. And so any path connecting these neighborhoods along River Road safely into downtown Forestville really opens up a greater network to do shopping by bike, just a lot more opportunity. So I was wondering if you can speak on efforts around bicycle safety in this area.
Yeah, so I feel like that was a planted question because this is something that I love to talk about. And I just also love hearing, you know, as a fellow parent, your desire to get your kids on bikes and to, you know, use that instead of a car, because I try to do that as much as possible. And I feel like I take my life into my hands when I do, given the state of our rural roads. When you asked, you know, is it pie in the sky or is it feasible? My answer would actually be yes. Yes, it is pie in the sky in that it will take quite a bit of time and money to execute it, but yes, it is also feasible because we actually helped fund a feasibility study and we actually have proposed, you know, where the alignments could go. And so one of the places that we actually really want to start is right in downtown Forestville, and we actually do have funds set aside for Mirabel Shoulders improvements and are looking at the very least, you know, trying to connect downtown Forestville to River Road as a start. And then we're also starting to look at what other opportunities do we have, even potentially kind of along the river. There are a lot of great examples across the country of like floodable bike paths. So it doesn't have to be actually on the road. In some situations, it could actually be kind of down along the river and you expect it to go underwater and then, you know, you just sweep it out and you're good to go in the spring. Kind of wash and wear like a lot of us are in the lower Russian River. And so it is something that we are actively working on. It is something that you're interested in. Would love to connect you definitely with that SCTA RCPA survey that I was mentioning, and would love to just kind of follow up. And if you've got any ideas about how we could improve even just your personal commute, what strategies might be, would love to talk to you. And also want to mention that Gary Helfrich, who is a former Permit Sonoma planner, is actually our representative on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And so I'm guessing that he would be happy to meet with you and talk through things as well, because he's really trying to advocate for how do we get more active transportation in rural areas. And he's a force to be reckoned with, which is why I'm so grateful that he's on BPAC.
Anyone else online?
No. Is there anybody else online who would like to make a public comment to Supervisor Hopkins? See no hands raised.
Great, thank you. We have a computer to. Oh, there it is. Oh, listen, I was wondering, we were like back.
I know, this one's gonna come out, it just takes a second.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the 2020 safety element update. And you guys have a presentation you're gonna put out. I would just ask you to be mindful of time. We're already an hour in, so we have about a whole hour for this. That would include input as well from folks as well. I know you get some big chunks there, but I think that should give you plenty of time. But what you're talking about is important.
Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So, hi everybody. We're really happy to be here. We're from Permit Sonoma. I'm Katrina Bramer. I'm a supervising planner in the long range planning section of Permit Sonoma's planning division. And with me, I have Claudette Diaz, and both her and I are the project managers for an update to our existing general plan. We're creating a new element, which is called the environmental justice element, and we're updating one of the existing elements, which is called the safety element. I also have one of our newest planners with us, Brendan Norton. He's going to take some notes on what we hear from you all today. But just for some context, the general plan, I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, or all of you, are familiar with it to some degree. And it is a high-level plan that sort of guides land use and growth, and Claudette will touch on that a little bit more in her presentation. But we're really focusing on the safety element and the environmental justice element. And I know there's been a lot of conversation about a larger general plan update, and because this existing general plan was first adopted in 2008, so it's a bit outdated at this point. We've experienced a lot in the last 10 to 15 years across the county, and conditions have changed. So should our policies. So these are two updates that we're bringing forward in advance of this larger general plan update because they're required to be completed on a certain time frame. according to state law. So we're moving these forward, but at the same time, we have actually started in earnest on our larger general plan update. So there's a budget available. We've got a consultant on board, and we'll be, some of our staff will be going to the Board of Supervisors on October 15th to give an update on that sort of background process, the planning process in advance of the larger planning process. So you'll, if you listen into that meeting, you'll hear an update on sort of the engagement approach that we're anticipating, which should be kicking off in January. And that will be touching on the big questions about our communities. Sorry, there's a flag. You know, land use, circulation, all of these big topics that you guys all care about. And so that will be like a visioning process about what do we want Sonoma County to look like for the next 10 to 20 years, depending on the horizon of the plan, and how do we get there. So look forward to that. But in the meantime, we're here to talk about the planning process for these two updates. But I was going to give, you know, hopefully brief presentation. We'll try to make it speedy so that we can get to a discussion. And we really want this to be an opportunity for us to hear from you all about your ideas about your community. You know your community better than us. And you guys have really great ideas. And it's really gratifying to see how many people have showed up tonight to, you know, engage in this forum and engage with us. So thank you for being here. We're happy to be here. So we'll defer to the chair about sort of the discussion section, but we have 4 big topic areas that we thought were, you know, we worked with Debbie and the land use committee to figure out was what you guys would most want to talk to us about, because these elements cover a lot of issues. And obviously, you know, limited time, we want to make sure that we're talking to you guys about the things that are most important to you. So I'll hand it over to Claudette, and then we'll go into discussion, and, you know, we'll work with the chair to figure out how to navigate that discussion and hear from the public as well. All righty.
Thank you, Katrina. So for just a presentation overview, we'll go over an introduction on the general plan, 2020 safety and environmental justice updates. We'll also review the project history and status and provide an overview of the policymaking approach. And then we'll have a discussion on select topic areas and a Q&A time permitting. So general plan, what is it? It describes the community's vision for Sonoma County. It includes goals, policies, and implementation strategies. It identifies strategies for managing preservation and change, and it sets a foundation for the county-specific plans and zoning code. The general plan is made up of 10 elements currently, so that includes land use, agricultural resources, open space and resource conservation, housing, water resources, circulation and transit, air transportation, public facilities and services, noise, and the safety element. The new element will be the environmental justice element that will be added on into the general plan 2020. For the safety element update, all jurisdictions in California are required to have a safety element as a part of their general plan. The most recent update to the public safety element was in 2014. However, there have been recent updates to state law requiring safety elements to evaluate evacuation route capacity and residential egress, evaluate climate vulnerabilities, and to include adaptation and resilience policies and implementation measures. State law requires that cities and counties address the following environmental justice topics in the general plan: pollution burden, access to public facilities, services and community amenities, health and physical activity, healthy food access, safe and sanitary housing, civic engagement in the public decision-making process. State law defines environmental justice as the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, incomes, and national origins with respect to the development, adoption, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. It was critical to the project team for community input to be a part of the planning process from the beginning. At the start of the project, our team convened a community advisory group composed of 19 members called the Equity Working Committee, or the EWC. The EWC has representation from all districts, and its members are community leaders with a variety of personal and professional experience. In addition to the EWC, the project team's community engagement strategy was designed to garner broad and detailed input throughout the planning process. In addition to the EWC meetings, the project team has had several focus groups, pop-up events, and a survey. Over the next few months, we plan to have a few more engagement opportunities scheduled, and you can find more information on the scheduled events on the county's website. To more fully understand existing conditions, the project team prepared several background assessments. This included the environmental justice technical report, which identified environmental justice communities and explored data on environmental justice issues. The climate change vulnerability assessment, which explores the vulnerability of populations and county assets to climate change. And the project team is currently working with a consultant to prepare the required evacuation route assessments for the safety element, which will be a high-level assessment of evacuation route capacities and limitations. One of the key points in the planning process that needed community input was identification of environmental justice communities. The project team worked with the Equity Working Committee to develop a methodology to identify environmental justice communities that best represented Sonoma County's needs. This methodology identified low-income census tracts within the unincorporated county that had elevated pollution burden across all pollution indicators, elevated levels of individual pollutants such as pesticides, or elevated housing burden. The lower Russian River area was found to have higher exposure to pollutants such as pesticides, cleanup sites, and solid waste facilities. This area was also found to have elevated rates of asthma and cardiovascular disease, as well as poor access to transportation options, foot retail, and broadband access. Here you'll see an index of the climate sensitive populations. The area of Monte Rio and Guerneville were found to have higher concentrations of populations that are vulnerable to climate change and its impacts. And you can see it in the darker, or the darker red color. Within the next few weeks, we'll begin to develop policies and measures for the elements. We expect a public draft to be available for public review later this year, which will be presented to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the Board of Supervisors for adoption. We encourage community members to participate in this process by attending these meetings and events and providing comment at that time. As we mentioned, we're in the policy development stage. The project team compiled the community input and findings from the project assessment to develop policy frameworks for each broad issue areas in the safety and environmental justice elements. These policy frameworks were presented to the Board of Supervisors on July 23rd, 2024. You can find those project materials on the Board of Supervisors meeting webpage. These policy frameworks are intended to be tools to facilitate conversations on policy ideas by highlighting what the desired outcomes are for the safety and environmental justice elements and identifying how we might achieve those outcomes through a list of potential strategies. This process will ultimately lead to draft elements composed of goals, policies, and implementation actions. Now we'll dive into the policy frameworks. We'll begin with the safety element, and we'll go over a few issues under the emergency preparedness and response topic, wildfire resilient landscapes, and seismic and flooding hazards. So this will be the time where we'll have some discussion with the MAC and members of the public. We've thought about maybe allotting 10 minutes or so for each issue. And feel free to stop us or let us know if we should move on.
We'll try to keep time.
No,
So that
we're good so far.
So as we go through each issue, the strategies and the desired outcomes, we really want everyone to think about these three questions. Which strategies are the highest priority for your community? What concerns do you have with the proposed strategies? And what's missing from the strategies that you think is the most important? So we'll begin with the first issue, which is alerts and evacuation. What we found was that barriers to evacuation can stem from deficiencies to the electrical grid, transportation system, telecommunication systems, language barriers, emergency facilities and services, evacuation locations, and inequitable access and distribution of resources. As well as inability to evacuate in a timely fashion during hazardous events can create direct impacts to health and safety and exacerbate chronic health problems with environmental justice communities at highest risk. Input we received from the EWC recommended that we focus on emergency preparedness, not reactivity, so that people can evacuate safely and timely. And that we should explore alternative alert systems so that folks can have accessible and effective emergency alerts, and to encourage individual evacuation planning. Based on this information, a desired outcome is that the community members, especially those that face systemic inequities, can evacuate safely and timely due to resilient infrastructure, accessible and effective emergency alerts, improved access to financial resources before, during, and after a disaster. Strategies to achieve this desired outcome would include preparing the community for evacuation through a variety of methods, such as emergency response alert systems, neighborhood evacuation plans and education materials, retrofitting critical communication services to better evacuate the community. This could be through exploring the distribution of information through radio channels or pre-established relationships with community-based organizations or CBOs and other means. Addressing language and accessibility barriers to emergency alert programs and preparedness resources. Conducting evacuation needs assessment to identify which areas and populations need the most assistance during evacuations. Regularly evaluating and improving the agricultural past program by prioritizing worker health and safety. Advancing worker evacuation programs such as implementing strategies that address disruption in pay and enhancing evacuation protocols for workers inside evacuation zones. And to invest in building relationships with CBOs prior to emergencies so that resources are readily available. So again, these are the 3 questions you should be asking yourselves. And we'd like to hear from you all as to what you think about these strategies for this specific issue on alerts and evacuation.
Okay, great. Why don't we go to anyone on the council have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one. You know, New Orleans is always a great example of what not to do. And I know that people get stuck because they don't have transportation. So you talk about, I just want to make sure that we recognize that there's a population that's elderly, disabled, or doesn't have a car, and they need a bus, or they need some way to get out. And often you're in remote situations where that kind of planning is going to be really critical. Identification of those people, those areas, and coming up with solutions.
Thank you very much for the presentation regarding alerts and evacuation and the barriers, deficiencies in the electrical grid. This is something that happens on a regular basis in Cazadero. In fact, we were notified today that we will have no power on Sunday from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6:30 at night. So this is typical again of PG&E's lack of infrastructure development in rural areas. Gaps in the transportation system. We haven't had county transportation in Cazadero since the trains stopped running in 1933. So we don't have public transportation serving the community. Spotty telecommunications. Let me tell you all about that. We had no power, we had no communications, and we do not have cell service in Cazadero. We were out of service for 9 days last year, 5 days in February this year. But that's why we have instituted this emergency radio network that has taken off like a fireworks display all over the county. I mean, people are engaged. But we were never contacted to participate in this program by your group. So we've been operating on our own, and we would appreciate the opportunity to share with you what we are doing and some of the successes that we've discovered.
Absolutely.
All right.
Love to hear. Yeah.
Good deal. Lack of evacuation locations. Again, Cazadero and some of the areas of Fort Ross, there are no locations. We have to get out, and there are only two ways to get out. You either go up the hill or down the hill. And that's it. We don't have a lot of choices. So, and the fact with the high-low sirens, when you've got a heavily forested area, you don't hear the high-low sounds. So again, we go back to our emergency radio network. That's the only thing we can do. The county has spent thousands of dollars with the NOAA radios, distributing them all over at farmers markets and so forth. We have no reception in West County with the NOAA radios. So it just, some of the efforts have been counterproductive, giving people a false sense of security. And when they need the NOAA radio, the NOAA radios are only pushing information out. They're not things, right? Little white things, yeah, that's right. That sit on your desk and you wait for something to happen and nothing happens. So those are my comments. And, you know, we do have a unique situation out here in West County where 101 corridor is well serviced for the most part. Out here, we have various body services. So
I'll just make a quick comment. I really appreciate you sharing that experience about the radio program and how successful it's been. And through the general plan, we would love to replicate the success of community initiated programs like that and figure out the role that the county can play in helping to facilitate those programs.
Supervisor Hopkins has been a champion for us.
Exactly. So how can we implement that into the general plan? How can we make sure that we elevate that as an example of a successful program and identifying what the county's role is in that and committing to the community that we're going to do that.
We'd be very happy to meet with you and have a presentation on the program.
Fantastic. Anyways,
go ahead, Betsy.
So in my neighborhood, we've become acutely aware of evacuation routes and lack thereof. Having lost the Summer Dam and the Summer Bridge, because we've sort of, ever since, particularly since the Wallbridge fire, we were acutely aware that Neely Road was the only way out. And there are probably 1,000 bodies and I don't know how many cars in that neighborhood. And that bottleneck would be just impossible. We, at the end of the road, we're talking about a swimming route across the river, because that may be the only way. So there has been talk for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years about a permanent bridge, a permanent second egress from the Vacation Beach neighborhood. And we're not the only ones who would be stuck. I mean, look at Mays Canyon, same thing. There's only 2 ways out. And if one of them is blocked, the bottleneck would be unbelievably difficult. Although there are fewer bodies in that area, but you know, my neighborhood is quite densely populated. And there are other neighborhoods like Old Cazadero Road, very much so. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a big concern is, and I appreciate that it's on the list, evacuation needs and routes. And giving people the confidence that they can actually get out if they need to get out.
Can I just say, I'll be really, I'm just gonna not pile on, but add on to what these guys talked about. I think all of our communities out here have very limited ways to get in and out of somewhere. And it would be really nice if someone, or it was in the plan on how to deal with a rural area like ours, because we're all sitting here and we kind of know which road we might go out, we kind of know how to get out, but I don't know if there's anyone that's actually putting that all together and inform the Lower Russian River this is what you should do. This is the way you should go out. We just don't know necessarily. And if I ask someone at the sheriff's station or ask someone at the fire department, I'm gonna get a different answer, and I should have the same answer from anyone that's in emergency services or from the county.
And not just roads to go out, but evacuation points where a helicopter can come in. Like in my neighborhood during the '86 flood, it was the treatment plant where people walked to and were evacuated. So that's another piece of it that people would be people would very much appreciate hearing about.
In discussion about the resort at Russian River, the Gurnwood Park Hotel, we brought up repeatedly how difficult it would be if they had their meeting room full with, what was it, 1,000 people was the capacity, and all the people who were staying there clogging the road while the residents up the hill were trying to get out. And, you know, it's a complex equation, but one thing that could be done is mandating that at first warning, any hotel must evacuate. So they would get out early, and when the crap hit the fan, and people needed really to get out, those people would be cleared.
That was a conversation we had with Commissioner. That's correct. But they would evacuate early. It's minor correction. I think the capacity of that meeting space is 300 people.
Okay.
Anyone else in?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think evaluating and the evacuation routes is an important aspect. I mean, I've been through several evacuations, and it almost doesn't make sense to evacuate when you're told to, which you're supposed to do, because it takes so long to get out. I think strategy 7 is probably a great way to do that, because the CBOs in the area are going to know the area and the problems, as these folks are pointing out right now. They can tell you exactly where that happens in their neighborhoods, as can I in mine. Also, again, highlighting the communication services in past fires. The only communication service that I've been had is a landline, which for a somewhat young person, it's kind of unique. We, recently the CPUC considered letting AT&T get out of the carrier of last resort. I don't know if that will happen again, but if that goes away, that's a critical communication device that won't be around. And then lastly, I haven't heard it mentioned, is the strategy 5. I do think evaluation and improvement of that Ag Pass program is important. And I'm not speaking as somebody, I'm not in agriculture, but I do see it's an important part of the community, and people need to be able to access their properties during those times. So thank you.
Thanks.
Hi there. I wanted to speak to the focusing on emergency preparedness rather than reactivity. And a couple of the things that I think the county could do and set up prior to an emergency. And I'm thinking specifically of floods here. I remember, and I don't know whether it was 86 or 95, but it was a really big flood. And I remember that the National Guard came and helped people, clean out their lower levels and whatnot. And essentially they help businesses, they help private individuals. Just if you needed help, they were here to help. And it was just amazing what the difference that made. And the other thing I would say is that when we had, after the first meeting of the first MAC, it flooded the very, very next day. And during that flood, Linda asked us to come to the Board of Suits and testify about why we needed help and what help we needed. And so I was there along with other people, and and talked about the need for dumpsters, okay, big dumpsters. And and the board was wanting to help. It was not a hard sell at all, but it was the sort of thing where everybody seemed a little confused. It was sort of like, oh yes, we'll have dumpsters for this weekend, but get it all done because they're not gonna be here next weekend. And then it's like, oh, yeah, we decided to extend it next weekend. And it's like, listen, for heaven's sakes, talk with Recology, have a plan in place, get dumpsters, have them there. It's like, you know, and just, you know, it was silly, okay? And another sort of prior planning thing with regard to lack of evacuation locations. I would hope that the county would identify potential evacuation locations in each community. I'm thinking Monte Rio, what's obvious is the Monte Rio School, possibly the community center, okay, depending on how high the flood was or whatever. But at any rate, and go talk to the school board or whatever you have in your community, the church council, the whatever, and say, hey, are you willing to do this? And people can't do it just, oh yeah, sure, the goodness of their heart, they need help. It's like, you know, how are we gonna get cots for people? Where are we gonna keep the blankets? What are we gonna do for food? You know, those are the sorts of things that have to be brainstormed and worked out with people. But do it prior to the next one, whatever.
Yeah. Anyone, okay.
A quick one, just in terms of the, you know, having the community involved and looking at communication. You know, one of the things all of us struggle with just as MAC reps, I think, is the number of people who don't live here full time and trying to make those connections. And, you know, they might be here during a crisis, and do they know what to do? And you know, how do we as a community help them? So just remembering that not everybody's here full time, and we don't always have ways to connect.
I think I just want to quickly piggyback off that and relate back to what Mike was saying. I think I'm so happy about the success of the radio program, but I want it to be clear that that's a third line of defense, and the county needs to focus on the first two as well, which is maintaining power so that we can have Wi-Fi in service and then increasing cellular service. For people who are visiting, who don't know about the radio program or just moved here, and honestly, it can have a bunch of other benefits, like say someone started a fire and they're camping somewhere and they don't have cell service to report it. Like, all of those things are important. I just want the takeaway to not be, look at these like third line of defense, full community programs that are filling the gaps that the county has left through the first two lines of defense.
Any other council? And we do have about half hour left on this, so.
This is quick. Just when you do your evacuation routes, is you have to probably do several depending what direction the fire is coming from. How we're going.
Anyone else here have? Go ahead.
So I live on Maryville Road in Forestville, and tons of traffic all day, starting around 6:30 all day long. And since Tamalino, which is now Laguna High, started their river bus shuttle, it was reported in a recent MAP meeting that 1,400 trips past my house from the shuttle. And all that's to say, Maribel Road's getting hammered right now, and we are getting new housing coming in. So I was gonna talk about what Ty mentioned, and that was the landline that they were trying to take out. And, you know, I rely on my landline. My power goes out regularly like that. And yeah, 3 evacuations I participated in. And one thing that stands out the most to me is that I've had large farm animals most of my life, and so I was called on to help evacuate large farm animals. And I think it's important to like factor all that in with, you know, how you can get these animals out. So that's my comments.
Anyone else here in the room on Zoom?
there's anybody in the virtual Zoom audience that would like to make a comment on this item, please raise your hand now. There are none.
Okay.
So next topic is welfare resilience plan. So just get my notes up. So, you know, I think because none of this is news to you, like you said, many of you said you've had, you know, direct evacuation experience, direct welfare experience, so you may have even had you all have plenty of experience with wildfire, and it's not a new topic to your community. It's not a new topic to the county, but it is something that has been really prevalent in our minds over the last, you know, decade, I'd say. So we won't touch too much on background because you guys know plenty about that, but some of the input that we've heard so far in the engagement efforts that we've done so far is that there's a lot of concern about air quality during fire season for both, you know, both residents, everybody else in the community, and particularly outdoor workers. So how can the county start thinking about how to, you know, mitigate those impacts? We should be having an emphasis on home hardening, and making sure that we're creating adequate buffers to protect communities from high hazard areas. Again, improve power and communication systems during emergencies. So having those be those, you know, first lines of defenses. And then concerns about the financial burdens that fires create and how that impacts, you know, the most vulnerable of our communities. So, you know, throughout this process, we've identified sort of a high level outcome that we want to achieve with the policies that we'll be developing for the general plan safety element. And this sort of translates into, you know, what looks like a goal in our general plan. So that outcome would be to prevent unnecessary exposure of people and property to risks from wildland and structural fires, prioritizing outdoor workers, the shelterless population, and populations that are most at risk of exposure to fires and during fires. So some of the strategies that we've identified, again, these are just ideas, they're not recommendations yet. We're here to talk to you about what else is missing. But some of the strategies that we've come up with and that the community has come up with during our engagement is making sure that we're relying on data and having complete data in order to make informed decisions about, you know, public action, budgeting, all of those things. So making sure that we really focus on data and science and we utilize that to help decisions. Regulating new development. I think, you know, I heard a lot about some of the activity that's happening in West County from a, you know, development standpoint. And while the safety element isn't like the land use element that's directing the types of land uses, the intensities and densities of development, it can start to think about, you know, where is development appropriate? And that's a conversation that's going to extend into the larger general plan update. So continue to think about that, continue to tell us what your thoughts are about that. But for the purposes of the safety element, we want to think about how can we retrofit existing development and think about new standards for like structures themselves, the space, how we can make sure that new development is really fitting into its environment. Leaning on the Sonoma County Hazard Mitigation Plan and the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Those are two efforts that are fairly recent, that are always tied to the safety element and incorporated. So they're basically appendices to the safety element, and that strengthens the provisions that are in there. And, you know, that includes a ton of scientific background and technical background on, you know, wildfire risk in Sonoma County and the specific hazard mitigation actions that the county can take. So making sure that we're really relying on those plans because they're often very community created, and, you know, making sure that they don't just sit on the shelf after we develop them. Improving post-fire relocation, assistance for household people that have lost their homes. They were displaced in some way or another. They can't rebuild. They have lost income. You know, how can the county take further action on that and, you know, make commitments in advance about how we're going to support those folks. And then again, community preparation. That is one piece of the puzzle, is making sure that folks on an individual, a household, a community level are preparing and they know how to prepare. And, you know, the knowing how to prepare and having the right information, I think you mentioned, just where do we evacuate? All of that's really important information, and the county has a huge role to play there. Supporting and coordinating with local and regional agencies in an effort to utilize alternative fire prevention measures. That might be prescribed burns for fuels reduction. So there's a lot going on within the wildfire space. And so how can we think about bringing some of those alternative strategies to Sonoma County and working with all the different agencies that focus on fire prevention. And then there are a few others thinking about ways to streamline environmental review processes for fire prevention, hazardous fuels reduction projects. So the California Environmental Quality Act is some specific action, a specific review process that's required for public projects and private projects. And so that is a really important law for a lot of reasons, but it also sometimes takes a long time to get projects done. And when we're thinking about important projects like hazardous fuels reduction, we really want to look for opportunities to make sure we can implement those projects quickly and in advance of, fire seasons. And then targeting programs to elevate awareness of impacts of wildfire on specifically low-income populations, special needs populations, and making sure that really we're prioritizing and elevating assistance for the resilience of those communities. They are folks that maybe not, aren't as engaged in, what's happening in their community, the resources that are available to them. So putting that into the general plan is really critical because that commits us to making sure that we're taking care of them. And then lastly, safeguarding business operations. We know that businesses are deeply affected by wildfires as well. And our local economy is extremely important. And so how can we think about in advance supporting staff, supporting local businesses through a variety of means, helping them with emergency evacuation plans, and thinking about, this is a huge tourism industry in Sonoma County. How can we work with that industry better, to make sure that we're preventing situations and everybody knows where to go when something happens. So any thoughts about that? We're all ears.
Thank you. I have a question regarding item 5 on the proposed strategies. How can we utilize Measure H funding to meld into community preparation?
Funding is a really important aspect of the general plan, and I'd say we are hoping to focus more on, with the programs that we identify with the general plan, we're hoping to identify which grant programs are available for a specific program and think more about how we're actually going to achieve these really wonderful actions and ideas that we come up with throughout this process. So I'd say that's something that we're really trying to prioritize in this update, something that doesn't exist in our current general plan. I don't really have any comments on funding opportunity.
It's like $5 million would be annually
so
devoted to that.
And making sure that there's transparency about funding opportunities like that and making sure that there's
good deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think there's plenty that we can put into the safety element.
Absolutely.
To talk about specifically funding because these things cost money.
Yep.
For number 6, exploring alternative fire prevention measures. Obviously love the idea of prescribed burns. Just wanted to draw your attention to North Bay Jobs with Justice that is training agricultural workers in prescribed burns and other types of forest stewardship. So just jobs training can be a great way to support people. I have a few acres of redwoods and it's very expensive, and there's a lot of privately owned redwoods that then being maintained will help our general fire resilience. But it's very rare to have a property owner volunteer to take on that time and money to get that done. And so ways to help private landowners address the health of their forest and keep them through fuel reduction. And one possible way is, I know there are a few organizations, I don't know their names off the top of my head, that are looking into portable sawmills for small trees. There are healthy ways to thin forests for the overall forest health. And so pairing that with foresters, approved groups of people that can go out and help people decide which trees can come down, and ultimately turn that into a resource either as a way to pay back the county or maybe the landowner keeps it for some fee. I don't know, just.
I have a comment, and it kind of straddles both areas, and it hasn't been mentioned at all, but People have pets, people have animals. The county does not have a plan, really, how to deal with that. I work with Sonoma County Animal Services on this when it does happen, right? And we get called in because we have to house animals, or they have to house animals. We get to a site like the fairgrounds, and it's kind of all you people there figure it out somehow. We know people have pets. We know people have animals. There should be something embedded in what the county does to accommodate for that. And whether it's like when you call the Red Cross in, I don't know what their policy is now. Sometimes they won't let you co-shelter with animals. So are there enough facilities that let you co-shelter so we don't have to keep animals in a little tiny cage inside a van? And that's kind of wildfire, it could be flood too or whatever, but just a general, how do you deal with people's pets and animals? Because people get very attached. And when there's an emergency, it also brings stability to people's mindset. Because they're family, just like we could argue whether they're as valuable as human beings or not, but if you take the human element too, it is a very comforting feeling to have your entire family, which includes your animals, knowing that they're safe and they're close by.
That's a good point. And we coordinate our radio project with the folks at the Halter Project.
Yeah,
we're also involved in this very, very deeply, and I've learned so much about evacuation with pets from the Halter group's presentation. It's been awesome.
I'm speaking here to improving home hardening and buffers. And I would like to see the county take just a very active, hands-on approach with that, okay? I don't think we need a whole lot more education. I think we all know we need to harden our homes, and most of us have a pretty fair notion of at least a whole bunch of things we could be, should be doing. But whether or not we have the wherewithal to do that is the problem. And it's a financial problem. It's also a physical problem. Okay, bearing in mind that in all of our communities, virtually 25% of each community is a senior. Now, I don't know, I'll just speak for myself, but I can't do as much as I used to be able to do, okay? And so people need help, just physical, hands-on help, you know? And it's hard to hire people, to find people to do that. If the county were to have a couple of crews that they could send around and help people, I think that would just really be good. And the other point I wanted to talk to is the regulation of new development. And that's a big one, I know. But I just think it's essential, okay? What I would like to see just baked into the general plan is that things do not get developed unless there is adequate infrastructure. Sometimes it goes the other way around. You know, things develop and you just hope and whatnot. And it's like, no, no, no. And adequate infrastructure means adequate wastewater treatment. It also means water, a sustainable supply of water. And we've talked earlier today about how, you know, our water situation is definitely up in the air and not settled yet, and nobody knows what that's going to be. And so that's a whole, you know, makes you wonder why are we talking development here? We should be talking water, you know. And the other biggie for me is roads. Okay, I live on one of the little one-lane roads that are very prevalent out here, especially on hillsides. And it's very bumpy, very, you know, nobody's fixed that road in quite a while. And if I'm trying to go down the road and a fire truck is coming up, or an ambulance, a rescue. So I mean, there is no way that you can get around that. I mean, it's one or the other. And so adequate roads for development are just extremely important. When I moved here, someone would drive up the hillside maybe twice a week. My husband and I would go out and look, wow, look at that. Well, those days are gone forever. Now, you know, there's a lot of traffic, but we can only handle so much traffic. And, you know, so anyway, infrastructure before development.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with anything I've heard. The strategies I think jump out most at me would be 6, 7, and 8. Emphasis on 8. Disasters and wildfires and whether that means having to evacuate or missing a couple days of work does not affect everyone equally. Folks with lower income who are on fixed incomes, that affects them much greater than somebody who has more income. The county is never going to have enough resources to fix every loss that everyone has in one of these disasters. So what they do have should be prioritized for those who need it the most, who are most vulnerable.
Thank you.
Anyone in? Go ahead.
You go first, that way.
You can do any meeting.
I find it surprising that in these strategies about fires and wildlands, there's nothing about the health of the wildlands that would be burning. We know that healthy forests burn slower, cooler, and less completely and recover more quickly. So I would like to see something about holding holding accountable anybody who impacts forest health. Many large landowners, particularly in agriculture or in logging, large mining operations. Healthy forests are less dangerous.
Thank you for that point.
Go ahead.
When you're talking about the pets, I recently read an article about Knox boxes. Are any of you familiar with that? Yes. Because then I looked to see if we had those in cats, which we don't. And that's a thought for people who might be out rescuing pets. I guess, what are they, boxes that certain people have access to be able to get into somebody's house and rescue stuff. Now, I've made arrangements with my neighbors have keys. If I go to Santa Rosa, I let them know if there's an evacuation, grab the pets. But I also thought that the Knox box was a good idea for other people. And I don't know how you get that into communities, but I know that our community does not have that option.
Reach out to the cats in our community services district.
I missed the meeting last night because
I was
picked
there.
up an old guy hitchhiking in Santa Rosa.
So either way.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just as far as zoning, really thinking about fire and not putting things inappropriately as far as zoning goes in areas that are already so vulnerable, you know, the whole area is zoned one way and you want to put something industrial in an area that's not zoned industrial when there's already a high, you know, fire risk.
Go ahead.
I think one thing that might be outside of your sphere of influence, but one of the things that will significantly impact people who are lower income or people who are, you know, where they're not people that are retired that are living on Social Security of that nature. Fire insurance is threatened significantly in California on an ongoing basis, and numerous providers are pulling out entirely, and people are scrambling. And I truly believe that the difference between making it on a monthly basis for someone who is lower income and giving up the security of fire insurance will be a decision that some people will have to make when fire insurance can cost as much as 10 grand. And of course, you know, if fire does consume one's property, then they've lost everything. So I don't even know if that's a part of what can be a part of your sphere of influence, but fire insurance is a significant issue for anyone, let alone those who are challenged financially.
Yeah, it's an important point to the whole picture. Maybe not something we directly have an input and ability to impact, but something that maybe we could influence in other ways.
We have over here and then we'll get to you, Tim.
Again, fire risk, and a lot of folks out here in West County have been getting their fire insurance canceled. They're having to scramble around that. The idea of putting asphalt out here in the forest seems unbelievable that it's not in the general plan if it belongs in an industrial area, not on the scenic highway that was established in 1982. We will lose that status.
Tim?
Perhaps PRND can work with the tax assessor and maybe our wonderful supervisor could help with this, but could there be property tax credits for home hardening for folks who are paying taxes in the county?
Anyone on Zoom? We're gonna move on just because we really have just a few minutes left.
It was an inspiring story I have for you.
There are no, there.
Okay, so go.
Inspire us.
Okay, I'm gonna sorry. So I got an ice park to swim, and during the big fire, there were people just walking around like zombies that had lost everything. And the community got together and they pulled together bags of toiletries for everyone, and you'd come in and there'd be like 60, 80 big baggies full of things, and it was just really lovely to see how much the community put together for at Ives Pool in Sebastopol. So I think if people could get on board with something like that, and that was inspiring.
Great. Okay.
All right, we've got a few topics left, but let's choose one, since we're low on time.
One's is really important.
It is. We have talked a lot about safety related issues. I do think we do have the environmental justice element. I also have heard some talk about like the appropriateness of certain development near residential communities. So we also can talk about pollution burden. If there is some interest, but we are happy to talk about flooding as well. So figured I'd leave the option.
You guys want to talk about flooding?
I think we need to.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so some of the input that we've heard so far in our engagement efforts with that, you know, people are concerned about the accuracy of FEMA maps. They're not really sure, you know, there's lack of information about what that means for them. Let's see, obviously disproportionate impacts on low-income and special needs communities, and just making sure that there's, you know, ways for people to be better prepared when the eventuality of flooding happens. So desired outcome is that all community members and emergency service providers in Sonoma County are protected from the impacts of flooding to the greatest extent feasible, of course, and that the county has a robust protocol for handling major flooding events. So some of the, you know, high-level strategies we've identified thus far is making sure that we're citing critical facilities out of those hazardous areas, because those are really important to the response, you know, and for disaster events. Looking at FEMA grant funding. So again, thinking about how are we going to implement these really important infrastructure projects, these projects that cost a lot of money, but are really important and move the needle on a lot of the concerns that people have. You know, continuing to regulate stormwater development and the ways that we have the ability to, utilizing open space as floodplains and making sure that we're thinking about natural solutions to flooding issues. Exploring rewilding opportunities, and then, you know, there is the public education piece. It's a small piece, but it is a piece there. So let's open it up for a little bit. Okay.
Council?
I want to speak to something that kind of goes with flooding and pollution and water in general. One of the things that happened during a flood, during a high water event, is that the Guerneville treatment plant gets completely overwhelmed. And essentially there's only so much, you know, stuff that you can push through the plant to be treated, and the storage has always been woefully inadequate. So when all that is used up, you dump it in the river. Well, that's really just not good. And to the point where the state board finally got really fed up with that and fined Guerneville $1.3 million, okay, for their last spill. Well, you know, that's another economic burden on a community that really can't handle it and is already paying immensely high, $200 a month to flush the toilet. I mean, so that's a rough situation as it is. Now, the state board has loosened the requirements a bit and told the plant that they can push more stuff through the plant during these situations, that the plant can actually handle it. They've gone from 350 million gallons a day to 450 million gallons a day. And that's likely to help. Now, I don't know that it's gonna do the whole thing, because during any flood, you know, it wouldn't be at all unusual for the Guerneville plant to be taking on in inflow as much as it is generally taking on just by daily usage. So you could get another 350 million gallons. And, you know, there's only so much you can do with this. And so, because it's not just water seeping down into the cracks in the pipes, every single person who has a house or a business or anything else that's right on the river, and the water gets into your lower levels. If you've got a toilet, for example, that is just a straight shot, 24/7, straight shot to the treatment plant. Okay, so it's, you know, inflow is a big deal. So my suggestion is that the water district needs to have someone on staff who is very, very adept and has a lot of experience with alternative systems, with probably cluster systems. And the point behind the cluster system is that it would only feed, pick a number, say 10 houses at once. Okay, and that 10 houses would get together and they'd have their own system. Well, and some of these clusters would still just get overwhelmed, but it would just be one cluster. It wouldn't be the whole area. And, you know, when a flood is happening in Guerneville, everybody who is staying in their house up on the hills, because they're not flooded and they don't need to go, is still washing the dishes and going to the bathroom, doing all those water things. So all of their water is flowing in too. Again, if you had a series of decentralized systems, you would really have the whole thing dealt with in a way that was not so overwhelming. Okay, and so my suggestion is that they really look into that. And I know that that can be hard for engineers, but try.
Go ahead. So the right side seems kind of fine. The left side seems lacking to me because it doesn't incorporate any kind of prevention of it. There are, and I know, and I'm thinking about my own community, there are serious drainage issues out here. And it's not just my community. I recognize that a lot of them have those kinds of issues, and runoff goes into the wrong places. And it does create flooding in places that don't need to flood. So I'd like to see some preventative things in resilience too, because we are resilient to flood if we can prevent it in the first place. And that's not in here. And that just, when I first read it, I'm like, wait, why aren't we talking about how we could prevent stuff? We can't prevent the river from going over, but we can control how water comes off of our hills, off of our canyons, and goes down into streets, into neighborhoods, into people's homes, into churches and schools or whatever. We know where that happens. And we can kind of point out, if we just did a ditch from there to there, moved it that way, non-engineering mind can even figure that out, right? So I think that is lacking from here, but I don't know if prevention belongs in this thing at all.
It absolutely does. Yeah. And I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. Mike.
I'd like to address number one, critical facility siting, and taking a look at what the folks up in Cloverdale have done. They COPE and their CERT group has had funding for basically a hospital in a box, a trailer, solar powered, lithium ion battery backup, the whole deal. That would be really helpful if we could have funding to develop something like that for our communities out here along the lower river. If we could cite something in, for example, in Cazadero, because when the river floods, Cazadero is isolated for days. When the river floods, Guerneville is in a jam. Perhaps a trailer could be sited up on the hill or somewhere at a higher elevation than downtown Guerneville. And the same would go for Monterrey. I mean, there are plenty of places in Monterrey to site something of this nature. So my suggestion is that we take a look and examine the potential, the possibility of developing that conversation.
Critical facilities and services can be mobile.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point.
Thank you.
Good.
Sort of to Pip's point, I had a question about number 6. Is this like beaver rewilding, or like what type of rewilding are we talking about?
There's nothing specifically that we've identified. It's more looking at opportunities that have co-benefits of like flood resilience and natural resource conservation. Right. So again, pretty high level at this point. There's no specific, specific approach that we've identified, but just thinking about opportunities that have co-benefits for climate adaptation and resilience, and our existing conditions now.
Cool. I think I'm glad that's on there. And I think I don't see enough about like flooding prevention. One thing could be around like creek restoration. There's definitely like drainage issues, but there's also, the mentality has been like, let's move water really quickly to the Russian River. But sometimes that ends up moving water so fast that there floods before it gets to the Russian River. And like on my road in Armstrong Woods Road, Fife Creek has flooded multiple times in the past year when the river was not at all that high. And it sort of has to do with how Fife Creek has been manipulated over the years. And so there are opportunities, this is like fully my expertise, but around building check dams and doing other types of creek restoration that would help slow the water and ultimately prevent localized floods.
Yep.
If I could just add on to what Spencer is saying a little bit, that the channelization of creeks in Santa Rosa also was a contributor to flooding. So I don't know, aside from Santa Rosa Creek, I don't know what other creeks have been restored or whatever, but that might be something that could be helpful.
Great. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something on the topic of flooding, which is I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Hansen project that Riverkeeper is working on. It's like a 360-acre property that has 4 different gravel pits that they are going to try to restore, and they are not currently connected to the river. And apparently, and I asked this question of the staff, and they assured me that when the river floods, it still doesn't connect to the gravel pit. So if that was essentially able to be restored as natural floodplain, it could actually potentially mitigate flooding in the lower Russian River. And so it's a hypothetical, but there also is an on the ground project And that is in the middle reach of the Russian River, kind of between Windsor and Healdsburg, kind of in that stretch in there. And what I learned also recently is that this would actually be a project on scale of Warm Springs Dam in terms of the amount of earth being moved. According to their website, it's 4 million yards of soil. But if they were able to sort of reconnect that and restore that as floodplain, it would greatly increase flooding capacity and potentially take some of that pressure. You know, basically, and that's great because that's upriver Northwest, right, where we really start to see that kind of, you know, funneling in where things just get really flash floody in the lower river. So just want to mention that. And if at some point in the future we want more information, I'm sure Riverkeeper would be happy to share.
Linda, at some point, people were talking about essentially being able to store water underground during flood or times of a lot of water, so that to mitigate the drought. And is that still being thought of or at all? Or?
Absolutely. So I serve on the Santa Rosa Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and I don't serve on Sonoma, but I know actually out in Sonoma, the water agency has actually funded pilot projects specifically to essentially create like a reverse well where it pumps water back down into the groundwater during high water events. But we're also looking at both floodmar opportunities where it would naturally percolate down. You can create kind of, you know, swales and the sort of slow it, sink it, spread it method of kind of water to help recharge the groundwater. And then also agricultural users are looking at, hey, if I sort of set my well up to pump water down, can I then kind of bank it and draw it out later, which is not traditionally how water rates in California have worked, but we're looking at pilot programs with the state water board. So great question.
Anyone on Zoom? Oh, we got one more here. I thought I did. I'm sorry.
Three things. First, on the FEMA grants, I would really love to see us encourage FEMA to actually issue some of the grants of for elevations. I know of 3 people just in my little neighborhood waiting for that. And anyway, that's going to mitigate a whole lot of cost the next time this thing goes up. And everybody here knows we flood every 10 years major, we flood every 5 years kind of minor. It's going to happen. So we need to get those houses elevated. And some of those are definitely going to be equity type issues. 2, on the rewilding opportunities, I'd like to see us actually look at restoring the depth of the river. Once upon a time, this river was a hell of a lot deeper than it is now. And a lot of it has to do with the silt coming in from the orchards, from the vineyards, etc. It's time to dredge the river. And I know that's going to be a big deal environmentally to do it right, to make it so that we're not damaging a bunch of other stuff. That if we have the dredge, then we've got the capacity for water to actually go downstream and not back up and take out a lot of our houses the way that it's doing worse now than it ever has. I just also want to kind of have kind of a general comment to kind of what I'm hearing a lot of here is, you know, we're talking about a plan now, and we've been through floods forever here. We've been through fire, and you know, since I've been here, we've had some of the major ones. And I guess what kind of keeps coming to mind is we're still talking about planning for something in long term. Yeah. And I'm still thinking about after the fires in 17, you know, watching, you know, the emergency services director, and I'm forgetting his name as I'm saying, said, we're looking at this. Well, why are we still looking at this? This is years and years later of something that's always an event. And it just seems like we got a bunch of people who aren't doing their job and getting something done and actionable. And I really hope that we take this plan, come up with something, and do something about it instead of just say, oh, we've got a plan. There's a bunch of other departments that have to get into this and actually execute. So, you know, sorry.
Yeah.
Riffing off of what this gentleman just said, institutional knowledge is really important. What happens in the county that I've seen in the last 5 years, a lot of people are retiring for some reason, but they know how their job isn't being passed on. It's not being written down. So it's not getting to the new people as immediately or as quickly as it needs to. And they're learning the same thing all over again. It takes years. Institutional knowledge.
I just want to second that because the crazy thing is I've only been in this job 8 years and I have sat down with Eric Koenigshofer and Ernie Carpenter and Mike Riley, you know, before he passed to try to learn as much of the history as I could. But there are many instances where I am the institutional knowledge in a room. And we definitely need to work on, you know, having good records that are kept and also reviewed, right, on a regular basis.
Yes, you know, and I guess part of my point though is, I still remember you after the flood, and you were out there fighting for us to get us somehow. We know what we need to do, and we ended up doing the same thing we.
That's what drives me crazy.
Yes. We have to reinvent the wheel every time. We have to fight for the resources every time because we don't have a protocol, right?
We know what roads are gonna flood. We know where we have weaknesses. We know that after a fire or a flood, exactly where it's gonna be cleaned up, because we've done it so many times.
But I had to fight for trash.
I
The biggest thing, and like, we pick up the FEMA had new rules about trash and
So I hope the feedback to you when we're talking like this is not seen as we're mad. Well, maybe we are. But the thing is that we have been here. We have said these same things over and over again. And maybe in here to what you were just talking about, and Tim was just talking about, and Linda was just talking about is use institutional knowledge to solve problems that have been thought of before and not just keep recreating what's the problem or keep asking what's the problem. We know what the problem is.
Focusing on implementation.
Yeah.
Like I said, we don't really need to explain much to you guys about wildfire, about flooding. You guys know plenty about it, more than us in a lot of ways. And we look to you all as, you know, the knowledge keepers in absence of county knowledge keepers.
And please, I know we have to wrap up, but please, like, you can get all of our contact information. If you want to know about Hacienda or Guerneville or Rio Negro or Forestville or Monterey or whatever, we have, if we're not the institutional knowledge, someone in our community will be, and we can put that person in touch with you so you would have that information directly.
And that's not always actually on a macro scale, it's also on a micro scale.
Yeah.
We've got neighborhoods that know, you know, the people who've been here 30, 40 years, they know how to educate their neighbors and take care of their neighbors in these situations because we've done it so many times.
Yep.
I think that's a really great point to end on. We really appreciate your guys' time. I think the implementation aspect of it is so critical because again, we know the problems. It's not really about identifying the problems that about, and we even know the solutions. It's about implementing the solutions in a lot of ways. And to your point also about community engagement and making sure that county folks are talking to the community. Again, you guys know your community's best. And so, yeah, I really appreciated everybody's comments today. I think focus on concrete solutions, the rightful criticisms of ways that we can do things better. I really appreciate that. So anyway, just looking forward, we have plenty more opportunities to engage.
There's just one comment on Zoom. And I also just want to mention, we have provided Katrina and with a list of community members beyond all of you also that we thought could be useful. And we have Chris Herrod with a online public comment. And oh, there you go. Okay, you can, there you go.
Hey.
There you go.
I encourage the county to look at the FEMA's community rating system. It basically encourages community floodplain management practices that exceed the minimum requirements of the NFIP program. And by participating in this, all residents within the county get a discount on flood insurance. So it starts at 5% and can go up to 45%. And we're all seeing rate hikes with the new risk rating 2.0 system. So I was really surprised to hear that the county is not a participating community in this program. So I encourage you guys to look into it. A lot of these suggested strategies would be something that the county would receive credit from by FEMA, and all the county members would be happy to receive a discount on the rising cost of flood insurance. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Linda.
I just want to say thank you so much for that suggestion, Chris. I will definitely look into that. And then I just want to take a brief moment to brag on Claudette and Katrina, which is true. I want to say, first of all, it's true that we have had a lot of turnover, and actually, especially in the permit Sonoma planning department over time. But the good thing about that is we have this absolutely amazing, I feel like, new generation of planners who really deeply believe in community-based planning processes. And so I just want to say thank you so much for coming out here. I know you probably have other places that you might want to be. And I also want to, you guys have also been at a lot of other meetings out in the community, and I just really appreciate the acceptability and the commitment to not just having conversations in Santa Rosa, but actually coming out here where folks live and hearing directly from them. And I appreciate you welcoming all of the passion that we have in our West County family. So thanks for coming out, and they really are listening and really trying to do sort of implement a community-based process.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Confidence because she's got great connections with the community. We want to utilize this group to expand the people that we're able to reach throughout these processes. So as we continue with policy development, check our website. We'll continue to funnel information through the district. We want to make sure that we capture as much of your feedback and the ultimate plan that's recommended to the board for adoption. So please keep an eye out. We're continuing to look for opportunities. We're going to lean on that list that Debbie provided, informed by you guys. So anyways, thank you so much. Our emails are available to Debbie. If you guys have comments, things that keep you up at night that you want to share with us, we are open to all of that. So thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Okay, next item, community and community project. We do have a community stewardship project, and that's in here, correct?
It's on the back.
So if there's is there any questions about that? Comment?
Well, I just want to comment on the hacienda traffic issues. I'm working directly with Shay and Debbie to sort of decide what we can do, what our top priorities are in terms of traffic calming and parking. And they've been extremely responsive. So thank you.
Oh, Shay. I'm just on the CC line.
I always say when Shay tells me he's on it, I feel better. So yeah,
Shay's on it.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Right. Are you?